Okay, so Wednesday, September 21st, we're on chapters 8 and 9. For today's lesson, you'll want to download marriottfaculty.xlsm, and we'll work on that. We have homework due tonight. How many of you successfully completed the homework already? Okay, so most of you, that's good. Glad to see you're working on this before class. Turns out that's going to help your experience in class if you work on the homework. Even if you haven't completely submitted it, that'll be helpful for you to have looked at it and say, gosh, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Go ahead.
I'm not seeing that link on my Learning Suite.
Fall 2016. Maybe refresh. I posted it just a little bit before class. Yeah, good point. Who said refresh? Wonderful.
I heard it too.
All of a sudden I thought maybe I posted it to the wrong semester or something. I posted it in last year's class. So, good. I think I need to download that as well. So I'm going to go to, we already have one. Okay. No, let's try to do it again. There it is. Show and folder. Now just move it. All right, so today we're talking all about functions, and we have here in this workbook is just kind of a background to be able to work on these functions. So over here on list, we've got a list of the faculty from. I just swiped this from the Marriott School directory website. Let's go take a look at the page that I'm working with here. We've got Marriott School. BYU, CH. Come on, is that it here? There we go. Okay. So what you're seeing here, the Marriott School publishes their directory, as so very, very many business school departments do and other departments. So trouble is, the information that I'm really after isn't really right here on this page. I mean, my life would be too easy if it gave me a whole directory on one page. So to actually get this data, I've got to go, the data I'm after, like telephone numbers and email addresses, I've got to come down here and actually go to the individual page to get it. So we'd like to be able to kind of automate that. And what we're seeing then is just the list that was taken off of this page. So when I come back to Excel, I'm on the list page. Then we're seeing the unique identifier for each one of these faculty plus their names. What I have over here is just a web query that's looking at that particular sheet. So why don't we just go ahead, and this should be review. We just had a project on this. Let's go ahead and record ourselves modifying this web query. In fact, why don't we do this? I'm going to go ahead and insert a blank row. So I just selected the whole row and give myself a blank row, somewhere to work with outside the results of the query. And let's just quickly kind of record ourselves getting to where we kind of that whole project that we've done before. So over here on the list, I'm going to start here on A2, and then I'm going to start recording. It should go pretty well. Record. I'm going to call this Get Faculty. I don't really need to assign a hotkey to it, but I guess I could. Control-Shift-F. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the ID that I'm on. Come to my faculty page. I'm going to paste. I'm going to select A1 and paste it. If you're already on A1, you'll need to go off of A1, come back and paste it. Then I'm just going to right-click. I'll select the first cell in the query, right-click it, and choose Edit Query. Comes up, and there's Professor Anderson, the professor who's in our class just before this one. Remember that the web query wizard's not going to record anything that I do here, so it doesn't do me any good to actually even just to change this, but I'll go ahead and click Import, and that will give me the code that it takes to import that query. And it should have taken a minute to do the importing. Copying data to sheet. Shouldn't take terribly long. Apparently it should take terribly long. going to go ahead and stop. I'll stop recording. From there, we can write some code to do more that we want with it. That should give us the code that we start to work with. So I'm going to come to my code editor, Alt F11, and let's take a look at the modules for the worksheet that workbook we just created. Marriott Faculty, Module 1. Here it is. Remember that if you're on Excel 2013 or 2016, you get this line, command type equals 0. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. In fact, now that we're getting a little more experienced with kind of playing with the code, let's realize that there are really only 2 lines that we need here to make this query work. All we're really changing is we're changing the URL. The rest of this stuff is going to be the same. We're not editing it at all. This last line that says refresh we do need, so I'm going to delete everything except the line that says connection and then the refresh.
Professor?
Yes?
Is it weird that under my macros, in the developer tab, under macros, it shows the one that I just recorded, but when I pull up VBA, it's not analyzable?
Yes, that's weird. Next question. Hey, Cameron, it's probably just a matter of where it's located. Super TA will come down and see if we can find it. Might have got it through.
Yeah, the module was
just closed.
Oh. It always opens so
all right. So we're simplifying this, just partially because so we can see it a little bit better. Get it all here on one screen. So really, to make this kind of refresh the query for the one that I'm working on, all I need to do is change where the ID is hard-coded. And remember, I pasted that ID into A1, so I can just refer to range A1 on the active sheet. Concatenate range A1. A1's value. And again, this is most of the review, but at this point, we should be able to run that and have it, whichever faculty I'm on, it should bring in that faculty's information. I'm going to go ahead and check to make sure that my code does that. So let me go to a different person. I'm going to come here to Brad Agel. Brad Agel has a full head of hair. If he didn't, I'm sure he would get called the bald Agel a lot. Control-Shift-F. And we really don't need to wait too long for this. Most of what we'll be doing today is dealing with this data that comes back. I'm going to scroll down and make sure that we actually brought Brad in. Yeah, here's Brad Agel. He is the George W. Romney Endowed Professor of Public Management. And there's his telephone number. Oh, that's great. I'm like making a video that I'm going to post on YouTube. You might be thrilled. His email address. Hey, buddy, it's public information. Okay. So really then, today's information is about working with various functions that we have inside of VBA. So I'm just going to pull up, I'm going to pull up, that's so neat that my browser won't select. What have I done? I must have sinned in some former life. Maybe this one. Let's try my educator. Start there. And here we are, chapter 8. I'm going to go back to chapter 8. Okay, so the whole idea behind a function in any programming environment is really the same thing as the function that you learned back when you were in pre-algebra. The idea of a function is that I give a function some value or some set of values, and given that set of values, it's going to return what? What makes it a function? It returns a value. So a function is going to give me back a single value. Typically, we expect that to be a deterministic value. It's based on the parameters that I give it. But in programming, it doesn't need to be based strictly values that I give it. If you think about it in math, you've got some function in math like, a function like square root. You give it a number, and it's going to return the square root. Every single time you get, in fact, we've got the square root function here in VBA. Let's take a look. Let's come to the immediate window. Question mark SQRT of 622521, and that will give an error. Oh, it's not SQRT, it's SQR. So in VBA, the function to get the square root is called SQR. 789 times 789 is 62,521. 622,521. I memorized that in the 7th grade, and it kind of stuck with me. How did I know that? We used to have to do these little quizzes, where we would work on a particular math topic, and then we would have to go up and do a quiz in front of the teacher. It's kind of individualized math program. You'd sit down, you'd work a dozen or so long multiplication problems, and then you would go up and have to solve one in front of the teacher. He always used this problem, 789 times 789. I memorized the answer. Anyway, okay. But the point is, every time I give it 622521, this function is going to give me that same answer. So I put in something else like 25, one of the other numbers that I happen to know the square root of. Not nearly so impressive. Then it always gives back a deterministic value. And so in the world of math, when we think function, that's what we're typically thinking of, right? I give it some value or some set of values, it does something with it, and then sends me back a single value. In the world of programming, functions do that. They send back a single value. They might not necessarily be deterministic. For instance, there's a function called now, which just returns the time from the system clock. It doesn't depend on what you give it. It depends on something else that it has access to be able to figure out its answer. And so it gives me back a different thing practically every time I run it. As long as a second has elapsed, it gives me back a different thing. There are loads of functions built into VBA. And since we're using VBA inside of Excel, where else do I have lots of functions predefined? Yeah, Excel's got a truckload of functions predefined. It turns out I can refer to those functions that are built in Excel directly from inside my VBA code, and I'll show you how to do that today. Okay, so if I'm looking at just some of these functions we have here using VBA's built-in functions. So there's a bunch of mathematics functions here. Absolute value, the arctangent. Most of these I've never really had the urge to use, the cosine. We laugh about that. Do I have any engineering students in the class this semester? Yeah, so it's pretty common that I have one or two students from the engineering school who come over to take this class.
Sorry, I was an undergraduate.
Oh, okay, yeah, but still, you can probably think of why you might use some of these other math functions in some kind of thing you're doing in VBA. So it's good to have them here, just not typically for the kind of stuff that I do. And so these are here. Here's this one here, int. This is one I use pretty often, actually. So int just returns the integer portion of a number. So let's do int, and let's put 5 or a 6.9, and that will just say, you know what, we're just going to just give me the integer part of this. It's different from cint, which stands short for convert to integer. That's going to round. Int just says truncate. Cint says round. So kind of two different ways to say I'm looking at this floating point number and give me an integer that somehow corresponds to it. Round, you can round a number. RND just gives you a random number between 0 and 1. RND. Sometimes it's nice to have a random number for various things. Any of you get the same random number as me? Nobody? Yeah, some of you did. It doesn't sound very random. It's like a bunch of you got that. In fact, if those of you got the same random number as I did, hit it again, you'll get, again, the same random number that I got. This is intentional. Yeah, so actually, you want to know the way the random number generator works in VBA and the way it works in most computing environments? It's not really a random number. What it is it's some complex, the random number generator, don't even know if it's something exactly where it's located inside the computer. Is it part of VBA or Excel, or is it something more fundamental in the operating system? It's like this really complex function, and you feed to it the last value that it generated, and it works on that and gives you back some other number. It's totally deterministic, but to mere mortals, it looks like it's just pulling a random number. And so, and the whole purpose is I want to be able to kind of regenerate the same series of random numbers to be able to test various things. So it really isn't random. How can we make it a little bit more random? I'll show you. If you say randomize as a statement by itself, R-A-N-D-O-M-I-Z-E, what that does is it seeds the random number generator with the number of milliseconds that have transpired since midnight on the system clock. And so instead of starting at the beginning of this deterministic sequence of numbers, it jumps somewhere into the middle of it depending on what time you said you wanted to randomize. So the chances that we both randomize this, or all of us that were getting that same series randomize this at the same millisecond is so extraordinarily slim that next time we run rand, R-N-D, it should give me a different number. Did it give me a different number? For any of you that were on the same sequence?
Yeah.
Different number. And so, anyway, that's something about the randomize function. Yeah.
You just put that at the bottom of the R&D? Like, does it matter where you put the word randomize?
Oh, yeah. So remember here in the immediate window, this is just a place where I can run one line at a time. And so I actually have to execute randomize, and then after that, subsequent RND, calls to RND, will kind of jump to that different place in the sequence of numbers that's getting generated. If you wanted to, you could call randomize every time you call RND, and then that would completely separate it from any kind of built-in sequence that it has.
So if you were to hit randomize in the immediate window and then go into Excel and just do random number, would that randomize?
The question is, does the randomize here influence the RAND function over here in Excel? And I don't know the answer to that. My guess is that it does. I'd be surprised if there's more than one random number generator that's available inside of Excel. It wouldn't surprise me so much if there were different applications relying on a different random number generator. In Excel, I would expect it to have the same one. So I think it probably would. Okay. So there's various square root, tangent, various mathematical ones. These data type conversion ones end up being really handy. So, some of these we played with last time. So all these ones that start with C date, C cur, convert to currency, convert to double, convert to integer, convert to long. So you've got a particular data type and you want to force it into another data type. That's what some of these will do. Here's one of them, ASC of some string. Let's take a look at this one. So this is short for the ASCII value. We looked at that ASCII table just kind of at the end of class yesterday. We talked about how strings were actually recorded as a number, and there was a table that converts the number that gets stored to the character representation of that number. Well, there's a pair of functions that we can use inside of VBA to kind of do that conversion for us. So if I want to know what the ASCII value of capital A is, what's the number that capital A actually gets recorded as? It's 65. Lowercase a is like 97. Incidentally, you can go the other way with the CHR function. So you can convert a 65 into a capital A by feeding the 65 to a CHR. So you can kind of convert back and forth between the numeric representation of a character and its string, its character representation. And so you've got various other functions here that are just available. A series for date and time. So we saw it now, which gives you the date and time from the system clock. You've got date, which just gives you the date. You've got time, which just gives you the time portion of that. If you just want the year, so year's a little bit different. You can ask for the year of a date expression. Let's take a look at this. So, and there's a corresponding month and day as well. So I could ask for the year of now. 2016. Or I can give it, some date, 1/1/1/2000. That should give me what? 2000. Now, if we go back here and look at what we had over here on the page, this tells us that I'm lost. Where did I go? So year, and it gives me a D. What's our author telling us about D? D is any valid date expression. So did I give it a date expression? What type did I pass it? I gave it a string. But remember, this is the way that most of these folks in VBA work. They say, you know what, I'm expecting a date. You gave me a string, but before I just get upset and tell you I'm not going to work on it, let me look to see if I can convert that into a date. And it does the conversion for you, which is really, really quite handy. You can just put it into some number. Remember, dates all start at a particular number. So what year was day number 1? 1899. Day number 2, I think, is 1900. Because 1899 is like, day number 1 is December 31st, 1900. So year of number 4 should still be 1900 until we get it to like 365. 300, maybe it's a leap year, 366. 367. There we go. And we get to the next year. So again, this is not a date expression, but it's going, if I converted that to a date, what would it be? In this case, it would be January 1st, 1901. And it returns it in. All right. Hours, minutes, seconds, days, weeks, months.
Why does it do that?
Why
is it built to, for the string to understand different inputs, even though that's not what we specified?
So the question is, if I understand the question right, you're saying, why is it, I could even do something crazy like this, Monday. Let's see. This Monday, that's the 19th. Monday, August 19th. What month are we in? September. We're not over yet. September 19th. Was Monday September 19th? Let's get rid of the Monday. Yeah. So even this string, September 19th, 2016, the function's able to look at that and go, oh, I can figure out what date you're actually talking about and do the conversion. So the question is, why? And the answer is, that's just it was a fundamental decision that the makers of the language made when they set out to make this language. They said, we are trying to make a language that is really user-friendly. So rather than saying, we've got to force you to put into a date expression or even just a string expression in a particular format for a date, it says we're going to build in all kinds of logic to look at that and try to figure it out. We'll look at this thing 9 ways from Sunday and try to figure out what date that person is talking about. And so it's just a philosophy about how they built the language. If you're an experienced programmer, you might look at that and say, well, how do I know which way it's going to choose? And the answer is you don't know. That could make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, what if you put you have some expression in day, month, year, or month, day, year? Those are both valid ways to write a date. How does it know which one to pick? And it has some rule that it uses to pick. Oh, while we're talking about dates, here's a couple that are I just want to introduce them to you really quickly. One is called date add. So date add says I'm going to add a certain number of somethings. So let's say I'm going to add a certain number of days. I'll tell it day by putting a D here. And then I'm going to give it a number, how many I want to add. 10 days. And then I'm going to give it a date expression, now. And that should now add 10 days on today and return that date. So 10 days from today will be October 1st at 3:58. Question? Date diff is similar. And it doesn't have to be days. I could add 10 years. I could add 10 weekdays. That's not what I want to do. that'll be this time for weekday. Could add 10 months. Interestingly, you put an N in for month. There's 10 months. Is that right? It's like 10 minutes. You can put an N in for minute. Maybe you put an M for month. Yeah, you put an M for month and you put an N for minutes. How many minutes? So that's 10 minutes from now. You can add all these different portions of a date onto that big one. You can also ask for the difference between 2 days. So I could do date diff. And okay, I want to know how many seconds there are between now and 10 minutes from now. 600 seconds between these two data expressions. Here's one data expression. Here's another data expression. And I've asked it for the number of seconds between it. I could ask for the number of days between it. Right? It will tell me 0 days. I expected a decimal portion in there, but didn't get it. Anyway, so date add and date diff are really handy. We're trying to find out how much time has elapsed between the picture. How far into the future is something. Questions? Yeah.
Does Excel have a list of those strings that correspond to the different types of dates and times? Like a D is for.
Oh, yeah. So where would you find out?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Let's take a look. So it turns out there's an interesting tool here inside our VBA editor called the Object Browser. If you ever have accidentally hit F2, brought up the Object Browser, and you wondered, oh my heavens, what have I done? You clicked on the X, it went away, and you went, here's the Object Browser. The Object Browser is handy in one sense, and then kind of disappointing in another sense, especially since I would like to stop stretching. I think my mouse is the problem. I'm dead in the water. Close. Oh, man. I think the mouse actually gets disabled. Anyone else have a mouse that I could plug in and see if it's just my mouse is freaking out? Anybody have a mouse? Try this one. Maybe I just unplugged my mouse. No, it's not the mouse. Oh, wonderful computer. Yeah, it sounds like a restart. Hopefully it's not a reinstall Excel experience. Class dismissed. Put my mouse back in. Okay, what other things can I do? Try Alt F4. Close this. Alt F4. Try to close the window. No good. Have I saved Excel? Close all windows. Microsoft Excel. Let's assume it says save there. All the nice things I was going to say about the object browser, I'm going to unsave. So we've got various objects here. One is the range object. You should be able to scroll here, QRS, find range. Okay, so I've given up on the object browser here for today. So to find out the list of arguments, this is how I always search for help. You go to help, using the Excel tools for help. That's going to be no help at all. So you're much better off just to come to Google and do Excel, VBA, and then whatever you're looking for. In this case, date add. MS Excel, how to use the data add function. Good news is this is somebody besides Microsoft. Over here, this one is Microsoft, and actually when you go to it this way, sometimes it's not too bad. But usually there's some description here. Here you go. Year, quarter, month, day of the year, day, week. You can have weeks. Certain number of weeks, quarters, and so on. You get quarters? No. Quarters. So that's how I always do it. Excel, VBA, and then just whatever it is I'm looking for. And you'll be presented with many options. Here's Microsoft's take on it. And they give you the same list here. All right, other questions? All right, so that's like Excel's built-in functions. Of course, we're not going to cover all of them. User interaction functions. We've played with some of these already, like the input box and the message box. And then we've got a whole chapter on string functions we're going to use here as well. Okay, it turns out that there are built-in functions, Excel's built-in functions that we can access from inside of VBA as well. Let's just go ahead and do an example of this because this actually gets a little bit, it's kind of some unexpected things in this situation. Sub, Excel, built-in functions. Okay, here's how you do it. You say worksheet function dot. And that will then bring up the list of functions that you're used to working with. So let's take sum. There's a sum function. It's built into Excel. And so now I'll open the parentheses. And what we're doing now is we are getting this function to run, but not inside of Excel. We're getting it to run inside VBA, and it's just going to return the value that formula normally returns, that the function normally returns. But how I give it the arguments is a little bit interesting. So first of all, I can give it 2 and a 4. And do a debug.print of this. And that should sum those two numbers. So that prints out a 6. But typically what I'm interested in summing a range, right? I mean, how many of you use sum like this, like in Excel? Some number, comma, some number. So it works that way in Excel as well. It's really interesting because when we see people, like beginning users of Excel, they'll get the sum function and they'll do like sum and they'll do 2 plus 4. What's that going to give me? It's going to give me 6. Because what happens here, remember we talked about expressions last time we got together. Excel's going to look at that and it's going to go, oh, I can figure that out down to a single value and do that math first. It'll be exactly the same as just running that with a 6 in it. Some 6 is just 6. That's a real problem. 2 plus 4 here. Because beginning students see that and they go, oh, I totally get how sum works. You say sum, and then you write a bunch of pluses on the inside to sum it up. Anyway, if I want to refer to a range, now if I was just doing this inside of Excel, I could just put here like A1 colon A10. But this has to be valid VBA syntax to reference a range here, and that won't do it. So how can I do it? Well, I could use that same thing, but how would I reference that range with VBA? Range. And then give it a string argument, so that will sum that range. So now just make sure I'm on a sheet that's actually got something in column A to add up. We'll start with A2 since A1 is just a letter. Should be able to run that and it should perform that sum. So what's fundamentally different about this is that when I use that formula inside of a cell, the formula stays. It stays around. Inside of Excel, when I run this, it just gives me the result, and wherever I put that result, it's totally gone. So maybe instead of printing it out, I'll write that to range C1. Right, if I was to put this formula in C1, the whole formula would be there. But when I run that code, it just puts the result there. It doesn't do anything with the formula. So I'm actually saying, hey, process this Excel built-in function inside of VBA, give me back that result, and then I'll put that result somewhere that's totally separate from the other. Question over here in the back?
Yeah, with the, let me think about this more before I.
Okay, glad to do it. So here's kind of the catch with these. It seems like a really arbitrary decision to make, but they said, listen, if there's a function that's built into VBA that does the same thing as a function that's built into Excel, you don't have access to the Excel function, you've got to use the VBA function. So for example, if I come over here into Excel, I could put in the formula here, rand. Give me a random number between 0 and 1. That's what rand does. Is there a built-in function to VBA that does that? Yeah, it's called RND. So here, if I try worksheet function, dot, R, there's no rand. There's rand between, but no rand. Well, couldn't they have at least in this list put a little note, use RND, it's built into VBA? No, they couldn't. I don't know why they didn't. Or why didn't? Apparently, it's more efficient to use RND than to use RAND. Still, let me use it. But they didn't. So, if you say, gosh, I want to use this function that I know is in Excel, and you come here and it's not listed, that means there's one that's native to VBA that will do the same thing. Get your Google fingers ready and go find it out. I don't know any other way to find out what the name of that function is except to Google it and find it. Okay. So rand between though works. Random number between 1 and 10. Okay, how many of you have ever worked on a worksheet that had so many formulas that every time you made a change, it was like, oh my gosh, I gotta wait 10 minutes. Been there? So it's like maybe a tenth, a fifth of you in the class that had that experience. So depending on how you're structuring that worksheet, you might be able to offload some of those long formulas into VBA and then say, you know what? I'm now ready to update this portion of the worksheet, which I don't need to recalculate every time I change any cell. I could build that set of formulas using this approach, and then you could have a totally separate refresh function that you've written that says refresh that part of my worksheet, and then you totally reduce kind of the level of interconnected formulas that take so long to be able to update. It'll still take a while to run through in VBA and do that part, but you'll decouple the fact that the whole worksheet has to recalculate together or not recalculate. You can split off a portion of it using VBA. Okay, questions on the built-in functions? Using Excel's built-in functions? There's a whole section on using the object browser. When I was talking to the author about putting this book together, he said, oh yeah, we want to have a whole section on the object browser. I'm all, the object browser is worthless. I don't want to use the object. Don't even bring it up. Oh, no, I love the object browser. I hate the object browser. Yeah, I really want to do the object. Okay, you can do the object browser. So, I hate it even worse now that it hung twice in one day. Occasionally it's helpful, but it just stops short of being very helpful. All right, let's take a look at string functions. So one of the things that VBA is used for a lot is for manipulating string functions. So that's our next chapter. We're manipulating strings. There's a whole set of functions that are built into VBA just for manipulating strings. Take a little bit of a tour. VBA string functions. And then we'll do something that might actually be meaningful. This filter is a little complex. I don't want to start there. N-string is not bad. We'll talk about it today. Here's an easy one, length. So this operates on a string, len. It operates on a string argument. And all length does is it tells you how many characters there are in it. Well, why would I need that? Couldn't I just count it and know? Couldn't I just count this and know there's 17 characters there? Yeah, I could if I was working with a string literal, but what else might be in here? Yeah, anything that the user has entered. Enter something. I run that, I got to type something in. I don't know what the user's entered at design time, And if I need to know how long it is, that was 40 characters. So length just takes any string expression and tells you how many characters there are in it. And there's a lot of them. You can ask, just give me the five characters off the right of this string. Give me the 5 characters off the left, or the 27 characters off the left. Give me all the characters except the rightmost character. Give me everything but the one. Okay, so let's take a look at what we might do with that over here in our faculty data. So I've brought back this faculty data. And let's just scroll down and see what we've got here for Brad. In fact, maybe what I'll do is I'm going to go find, just in case you weren't here to actually update that web query, let me go find Anderson. Greg Anderson. And I'm going to refresh it to Greg Anderson. That way we'll be working with the same data on the sheet that you had if you haven't gotten the web query to work. So our example will follow through. Control-Shift-F should bring in Greg Anderson. And so the idea, this example that we're starting today and probably will never ever finish, is to say I've got a list of things, I've got to go pull some information off of the web for each one of these. The data that comes back needs some massaging, as this data does, and we're going to use these string functions to do it. So I'm going to come down here and find where I've got Greg Anderson. So here, I've got his office, his phone, and his email. So we've got to figure out how to kind of split these things up, because you'll notice that the word email is built right in here with the value that I want. I want to get everything except this email. So let's look at several ways to do that. So I'm going to start off just by taking that string, and I'm going to bring it into VBA to work. So we call this some string demo. Dim my string as a string. My string equals. Okay. So, talk to me about how I can figure out where, I'm looking at an email address, how I can figure out where to split this thing. I only want the email address. I don't want that label on the front of it. How do I do it? In English. Don't tell me VBA. Give me an algorithm that would work for this. I could say it again.
Cut email out.
Okay, so one approach is I can just get rid of email. All right, let's take a look at that. Actually, let's assume that we know that email is going to be at the beginning. So in this case, if I know I'm looking at email, then I can say, you know what, these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters are extra. I don't need them. And so let's see how we would do it. We'll do a debug.print. We'll do it a couple different ways. We'll do it several different ways. First one is to say, well, I need the rightmost number of characters off of this. So let me print the right of my string. How many characters do we want? I don't know. Let's say there's 15 there. I'm just guessing. 15. So I'll run that and let's see what it gives me. It gives me Anderson. Okay, so that gives me the right. That's the rightmost 15 characters. I was off by, something like 6. 21. What do we do? There we go. So that gets me the whole thing. Whew. Well, I'm going to ask for the rightmost characters off of that. What's the problem here? Yeah, when the email changes, this is the problem. So, how could I modify this so that no matter what it is? Yeah?
You get the length of string -7.
Ah, okay. So I know that however long the string is going to be 7 characters more than I need. Well, we already know how to get the length of the string. Length of my string. And if I do that, that should give me the whole thing. So I want the length -7. And so I'm taking the rightmost characters off of my string. How many am I taking? I'm taking that many. And it's got to figure that part out. And that then should give me just the email address. There we go. And it won't matter what the email address is. It'll now pull that off. If it's just Ganderson, gives me Ganderson. Any questions here? Okay, here's another way to do it. There's a function called mid. It says, look at some string, start in a particular place, and then take a certain number of characters. I'm going to start the 8th character and take 10,000 characters. And that prints. Remember, this one's still alive, and so that one's printing. This one prints as well. So it starts with the 8th character. I'm highlighting the 1st character, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. There's the 8th character. It's starting with that one. Taking the next 10,000. Well, there's not 10,000. Why doesn't it cause an error? Yeah, VBA's looking at it going, well, 10,000 or whatever you gave the string, that's fine. But watch this. This last argument is actually optional. And so if I don't tell it to take all of those, it'll still just bring back that same amount. Brings back, it says, I'm going to bring back all the rest of it. If I give it a number that's smaller, like 3, it'll start at the 8th character and bring back 3. So mid is returning something out of the middle of the string, but if I don't tell it how many characters to bring, it starts where I tell it to start and then brings back the rest. There's another way to do it. This one will work no matter where email : space appears in the string. There's a function called replace. I give it a string to work on. I tell it what to look for, and then what to replace it with. This is a weird thing to do, but you'll see that it's actually doing the replace here. I'm just changing email to Fred. So it finds email : space and replaces it with Fred : space. So if I want to get rid of it altogether, what do I put here? A 0-length string. Replace it with no characters. And that should do the same thing. There are other ways to do this. Should we keep going? Yeah.
Is there a way, when I did mine, I used the instead function and then used the reverse instead function? Or my question is, could you use the reverse instead function to get the tail end of the string?
Okay, so here's the question. We can ask, let's suppose that we don't know what's going to be here. All we know is there's going to be something before a colon in a space. Could we generalize this to work either for office phone or email? It's going to have different lengths. So could we say, look, just find where it says : space, and wherever that is, let's start from there. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We dim a variable called position, POS, as an integer. Short for position, people. Then we can ask position equals in string, INSTR, start at the 1st character, look at my string, look for : space. This now will return. I'm going to go ahead and do this kind of step by step. So I'll put a breakpoint on ENSA, and I'll run this to here. Now let's take a look at what position is. So that says it found the string at number 6. Does that make sense? Does it make sense to have found this substring at 6? Let's take a look. I'm highlighting the 1st character, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Yeah, it starts right there. So if I'm thinking about where I want to start taking the rest of the data from, what do I have to do to position? Stand by. So here I'm going to add 2 onto it. So position is going to give me now where the data starts, assuming that whatever I'm looking at as some label, colon, space, and then the data starts. And so now I can do a debug.print of my string, but instead of 8, what do I put here? The position that I just calculated. So now it doesn't matter what's here before the colon, I can put anything. As long as the first instance of colon space is there, it should still find that and strip out just the email address. Question here? Yeah.
What is that question for?
The +2 here is because the string that I'm using as my delimiter is 2 characters long. And so it's going to find this. Let's just go back to email. It's going to find this string that I'm looking for at 6. And if I don't add that 2 onto it, it's actually going to give me the colon and the space as well. So here it gives me the colon and the space. I'm saying I don't want the colon and the space. Shift over a couple of spots. Okay, so now you're using a negative index.
That's what I did, yeah. Or thought I would do. I didn't try it because the directions I used to do.
So, yeah, in-string does some interesting things. If I want to, I can find the first space looking from the right of this using in-string reverse. Position equals INSTRREV. The string I want to check is my string. I'm looking for the first occurrence of colon space.
My string.
And that again tells me 6. This one's looking from the right hand, and so for some other reason there's another colon space in here. It will find this one rather than this one. So now my position here is 14. Because in-string reverse looks from the right and comes this way. See it? All right.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
When you did position equals in string 1 my string colon space, that 1 is that saying start at the first letter of.
This says start at the first character.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a really long string, and I want to skip the first 100 characters. You know, what I'm looking for might be in the first 100 characters, but I don't care about those. Then yeah, you can tell here start at character 100, and it'll just. I've got this long string, and so we're going to start looking here, and it'll tell you where to find it.
How is that different from the mid one that you used?
So the question is, how is this different from mid? And the answer is, what mid does, it's highlighted, it's commented out. What mid does is it returns a certain number of characters from inside the string where I tell it to start. End string says, tell me where one string exists inside of another string. So the end string is going to return a number, whereas mid is going to return a string, a set of characters that I'm trying to extract out of the string. Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with one that I stumbled upon with split. And you
Yeah, split is fabulous.
Yeah, you specify the character you want to split it on, and then it turns it into 2 different. Puts it in an array.
Makes it into an array. Yeah. We'll talk about split when we talk about arrays. Or we can talk about it now. What do you think? How many would like to see a really cool function even though I haven't given you the background to understand it yet? All right, let's take a look at it. Let's suppose, there's enough of you here. This really is great. And you know what? You could probably be useful with this even without understanding the construct that's building on the way to what it solves. Sub-split demo. Let's see if we have any data that makes sense to split over here. We may not. This isn't too bad. Yeah, let's just go ahead and work with this. It'd be nice if there's something with 3 commas in it. There we go. So this is on line 209 of the file. Again, str as a string. Str equals looks like this guy's been a reviewer for the International Conference on Information Systems, ad hoc reviewer for something, and something else. It's kind of a weird thing to have show up, but here it is anyway. So what split does is it says, look, let's look at this thing, and let's split this into several different strings based on a delimiter that I specify. So kind of the strange thing is that it's not going to return a string, it's going to return a set of strings in a structure called an array. We'll talk about arrays in great detail later. You'll know more about arrays than you ever wanted to. You'll know enough about arrays to get arrays. But for today, just stand by. So data equals split my string, and then I got to give it what I want it to split on. This looks a little bit weird because it's comma delimited. So I have comma, quote, comma, quote. Ooh. This comma is separating the two arguments. This comma is actually just text that we're using to pass to the split function. So I'm going to run it to there, and then we'll kind of take a look at data. So now data is this more complex structure that has multiple strings in it. If I just try to print data, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. You can't just print this whole array of strings. But I can tell it which one I want to print. Print number 1. And it tells me ad hoc reviewer October. So do you see that ad hoc reviewer October right here? Nice. Why is that number 1? How come this isn't number 1?
Starts at 0.
Yeah, because that's number 0. One of the weird things about arrays, you start counting at 0. So string number 0 is that, string number 1 is that, string number 2, string number 3 is just 2013. I should be able to look at this and just say string number 3, and that should pull off just that portion. Incidentally, I can do this all, if I only need one of them, I can do this all in one stroke. Let me actually, let's undo that. So this returns that string, or that array of strings. Again, I've got to tell it which one I want. If I assign that to another variable, when I want to work with one of them, I've got to give it its index number. But if I only need to deal with one of them, I don't need to split it and work it. They're different ones. I just need one of them out of it, and I can do that all with one stroke. Split it, and then return me the third one out of it. So that should both return, that should print out 2013 twice. Incidentally, if I have split, I can join those back together with the join function. So I can now print join data, and again use the comma delimiter for that, and that should print the whole string out. Of course, the whole point is to modify this somehow, so I could say, in the meantime, I could say data sub 2 equals reviewer hits. Hawaiian Information Conference Information, HICCS. Hawaiian Information International Conference on Computer Systems. Isn't that a great idea? Let's have a conference in Hawaii every January. It's a great place to have a conference. So you see what we're doing here? I'm splitting data. Go ahead and kind of put these in different order. Okay. So here I'm saying split this string into that set of strings, plug it into this variable, Now I'm going to modify one of the elements of that string. I'm going to put something else in here. Then I'm going to join those back together. And I'm printing that out. So let's just do this. I'm going to write back over the top of the string, str equals joined version of it, and then I'll print str. So now I have modified just that portion in the middle by saying, cut it up into its pieces, let me change a part of it, join it back together, and we're ready to move on. So even though you don't really understand the ins and outs of this structure that's built here in the middle, I think that example is helpful enough. You could probably use that and modify it and do some interesting things. Other questions here? I think we've got a couple more of these that are more complex. This string convert is kind of a neat one. Let's take a look at it. So it turns out that there are, let's just do this one in the immediate window. So let's say I had a string, Levi, son of Levi. I can change the case of this by saying I want this whole thing to be uppercase. U-C-A-S-E. And that gives us uppercase. I can make the whole thing lowercase. That means the whole thing lowercase. What if I want to make the whole thing proper case? No p-case function. Actually, there's one in Excel. I could use worksheet function. It's called proper. That'll give me proper case. There's also a way built into VBA that will do proper case. It's called strconv. I give it the string that I want to convert, and then I tell it, what do I want to do? I can convert it into proper case. And that will give me the proper case version of it. There are all kinds of other choices which I have never even looked at before. I can convert it to Japanese. I think that's some Japanese. Hiragana? Katakana? I don't have any idea what that would do. Anyone here serve a mission in Japan or speak Japanese? Yeah? So if I had Japanese letters here, I could convert that. That's amazing that VBA can do that. It would have to be Japanese characters. I'm guessing it's not going to do anything, but I don't know. I don't even know what to do. Yeah. So we're working with really simple characters, 1 byte per character. To get to these more fancy alphabets, it takes 2 or more bytes per character. And that's what we would need to do. VB uppercase, several words. Okay. So we do some string conversions as well. String reverse just reverses the string. There's the reverse version of it. Why would you ever want to reverse a string? What's that? Yeah, there are some times when it's kind of neat. Kind of 2 reasons. One is it's a lot easier to take everything but the first character, or everything but the first number of characters, than it is to take everything but the last number of characters. Because I could just say, I want to see that in 2. Question mark. This string, mid, that string, comma 2. And that just starts with the second character. But if I want to get to the very last character, everything but the last character, I've got to know something about the length of this and take everything up to I want the left number of characters. How many? The whole length minus the number of characters that I want to skip off the end. Or, if I was doing several things like that, then I could reverse the string, work it that way, and then unreverse it at the end. Turns out I don't use string reverse very often at all. But there it is. What else do we have? UK string. I think that's the main things I wanted to cover today. Uncharacteristically, we're done several minutes early. I know you'll get all broken up by dismissed class early. Changing UK string conversion. String characters you can't type in. We talked already briefly about using a particular character code. We only looked at it with characters that we could type in. Here's the last thing, and then I'll let you go. So I can ask for a character number. Now, what's a character you can't type from the keyboard but you've seen somewhere? 196. I don't know. What's the character number 196? There's character number 196. You've got characters up to 255. I think in the book they gave the example of the copyright character. There we go. 169. 169. And so, you've only got 101 keys on the keyboard, and a bunch of those don't even type characters. You've got 255 characters, and so if you've got a character to work with that you don't have access to on the keyboard, you can just refer to it by its character number. That's it, folks. Thanks for coming. Have a good weekend. I will see you on Monday. Got homework due tonight. Class dismissed.